I've fallen flat on my face. People are just clamoring to get into technologies without a vision, without a focus. We still need to build out what the process flow is, what the handovers are, when no one has the muscle memory of what a reconciliation is. So how do you catch that? When you automatically automate everything and use AI, you lose control.
Jack P. Flaherty is the founder and author of The Decision Switch, a guide to making critical choices in today's fast-moving world. Having founded Connacht Ventures, and with 25-plus years at Morgan Stanley, Deloitte, and PwC, he's now guiding leaders and their people to make high-stakes decisions that actually stick.
The biggest risk with automation and AI is quality. You assume that the output is correct. Well, that is going to be your pitfall.
Just automating the thing is generally the wrong answer.
At some point in time, somebody's going to ask a question that'll make you look the fool. Not because you were wrong, but because it's obvious that you didn't do the work. Your idea may last, but you're probably not going to.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the AI for Business podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Torello. With me today, my guest is Jack. Jack, tell everybody who you are. Give us your story.
Hi, I'm Jack Flaherty, founder of both Connacht Ventures, where I do consulting for a lot of technology organizations, but also speak and publish books. My most recent book was called The Decision Switch, where I talked to organizational leaders about how to make better decisions, for their mission, for their goals. And currently in the process of launching a new platform called Spot the Ripple. Again, talking about decision making. But what I found is that when you don't really have a mission, you don't have a goal, you don't see where the future's going, it's really difficult to make good choices. And when Jeff reached out about AI, it seemed no better perfect fit.
Awesome. Okay. Your latest book's called The Decision Switch. Does it talk at all about AI, or is it specifically about the decision-making process?
It's specifically about the decision-making process. That being said, prior to writing the book, the catalyst was having spent 2.5 years in blockchain, and before that, a number of years in AI and automation. What I found out is we've got a lot of brilliant technologists out there who have not been given the fundamental tools sometimes to make the right choices. And as you can read the Wall Street Journal, what happened to blockchain, a lot of bad choices were made. But I still stand firm that these technologies are revolutionary. They're here to stay, and if we use them wisely, it can make the difference between your business being successful or you becoming outdated.
Hmm. Okay. That sounds pretty intriguing. Sounds like a book I need to read now. All right. You just sold me a book, Jack. You did great.
Right.
Tell me a little bit about your AI journey. Where are you? Where'd you come from? What's your AI interest right now?
Sure. Brief background. I spent 17 years in the Big Four, and so in the process, one of the things that I observed was it's probably about 10 years ago, I think. The firms started incentivizing the staff to develop either AI or automation that would eliminate, for better words, manual tasks. It was the first inkling of Spot the Ripple in that you saw for, say, $100 voucher, someone was designing a script that was going to eliminate tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars of work, all for the sake of speed, efficiency, and use of, like I said, these technologies. So where I'm at with my own personal journey is, like I said, I do both strategic consulting for technology organizations, but I also try to work with executives and corporations about where they want to go with their journey. In the process of doing so, one of the things that I found is people are just clamoring to get into technologies, jumping into it without a vision, without a focus. And as results, you see them spending hours, weeks, months, years trying technology unsuccessfully. And I think that's where we need to start going slow to go fast. Because if we truly understand our organization and understand what these technologies can do, we can make quick changes that actually have a positive impact quickly. And even for my own business right now, I'm in the process of working with a couple of new tools for both automation as well as AI to automate a lot of the operational process flows that I've outsourced to Indonesia and some of these other areas that I had, virtual assistants
Right.
and other hands holding the process. But the problem is that introduces the human error. And if we can eliminate that, it improves our quality, our efficiency, our profitability.
Yeah, it's a common story that I hear with clients regularly, and there's a couple pieces to it. I'm curious what your experience has been, so I'll poke and prod on you. Uh,
Sure.
so yeah, so probably in the last 20 years, the idea of offshoring and outsourcing some functionality because the rates are cheaper, et cetera. Okay, makes sense to a certain extent. Yes, the human error gets introduced in occasions. So then we work on, okay, we have a process, and now there's more overhead in deploying that particular solution or using that tool or implementing that process, et cetera. That's how we typically solve that, right? And then the overhead starts to become too intrusive and slows things down. And now we're not getting the response that we want, or we're not getting the turnaround that we want. And so the next thing logically that people look at is automation. Okay. What tends to happen though is that you can't generally automate what humans do at the thinking level. What you can automate is the tasks. And so someone looks at this situation and says, all right, I have a business process that I've currently got being done manually, whatever that doesn't even have to be offshored. I want to automate it because I'm getting a delay or I'm getting errors, or there's a bunch of reasons why people go down this path. But have you found that automating a process is actually as simple as it's supposed to be? Or have you found that, well, there's some gotchas hanging in here that aren't as simple as it'd like it to be?
I want to hit both points that you touched on because I do know
Sure.
offshoring is becoming huge. And the challenge is that if you start looking at the tasks that were assigned on a daily basis, those that are not getting automated, you're right. It's something that can't be. And that's where I had my frustrations. I was getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, spending 2 hours a day with my VAs because all of my work is really high level, deep thinking, whether it be strategy, compliance, risk management, finance, putting out, financial models, those types of things. And so, yes, it is, zeros and ones to some degree, but at some point in time, the human element is critical for, you know, you to make an impactful change to an organization. So, as you mentioned, success and failure with doing automation. Yes, I've fallen flat on my face.
Right.
And the reason why is I prescribed to what I thought was the right thing to do is just jump in and work with the software and figure it out.
Yeah.
But I've worked in management consulting for 20 years. And whether it's a manual task or an automated task or using AI, we still need to build out what the process flow is,
Yep.
what the handovers are, where we need to inject information, maybe for communication, maybe financial reporting. And if you don't have a strong process flow, looking at things like compliance, risk management, approvals, controls, then you lose control when you automatically automate everything and use AI because you need that type of approval, for a process to effectively work. One of the risks that I brought up in a accounting podcast not too long ago was what's going to happen to the accounting industry in say 8 to 10 years when no one has the muscle memory of what a reconciliation is. And so now you're going to be asking AI or automation to do that for you. But how do you know that there wasn't a design error or flaw in the code? And so how do you catch that? So by taking a step back and looking at what the process looks like, that's when you can start, incrementally identifying those areas of opportunity. And when you sew that together, that's where you get the grand efficiency.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is super key, Jack. I'm glad you brought it up because it's one of the points that I think is very valuable. Just automating the thing is generally the wrong answer. As you said, just starting out with, well, I'm just going to automate this and I'm going to use the tool and I'm going to bang on it until I get something that's a facsimile. Where you're going to find the most success, whether it's AI or not, in this case is not relevant, you have to break down what the steps are in the process, in the task, in the job, whatever it is that you're trying to do automated, and look at where are the perfect candidates for easy automation and where are the candidates that I need human in the loop. I need a approval process that could be automated by another thing, but there's a step here that has to happen. And that step can't just be part of the manual flow or whatever it is, because then once you do that, once you have a work breakdown structure, I'm abusing that phrase, but it's generally what we're talking about. Once you have those pieces, you can eyeball, okay, I can do 1, 3, and 5 easy with code. The AI can handle it. I can make that repeatable. Great. 2 and 4, I need something else. I need an assisted AI thing. I need a custom agent, whatever. And it then lets you break it into easy, manageable stuff. And so you start with, let me automate 1, gets everything kicked off, and I'll do 2 by hand. Let me start automating 3. And then you get to the point where I'm doing 2 and 4 by hand, but boy, 1, 3, and 5 are done. And now you start doing the harder work of, okay, how do I get some automation on 2 and 4? And maybe you end up with, there's a 6, and the 6 is, there's a human who gets a message that says, we think the automation's done. Please give it a once over and click the button. And then that button click could be a VA. It could be a you, but not at 4 a.m. It could be at 7:30 with a nice cup of coffee, right? Like there's a lot of variable in there, but the whole point is when you're going to automate something, if you haven't broken it down into the right steps, you're probably not going to achieve success. You need to really understand the finite details underneath the automation desire and then figure out which ones are easy, which ones are hard, and which ones fit the AI structure or not.
Oh, absolutely. I was listening to a book the other day. Gosh, I wish I could pull it out right now. I'll send it to you afterwards. You can put it in for your readers or listeners. But it was when I believe it was Pat Riley came on to the Lakers. He challenged every player every day to get 1% better, and cumulatively, that's how they got to the first championship. And I think that's a great example for AI and technology. Is don't try to take down the whole organization, automate, and use AI for everything. Because if we do small incremental steps, when you look back over the course of a year, you're going to make quantum leaps.
Right.
The second thing with that is, what I share with my clients, particularly with the executive leadership team, is that say there's 3 executives, CEO, COO, CFO. You've got 6 eyeballs that are scanning the horizon. What's going to impact us? What's going to hurt us? Where's the opportunity going to go? Well, if you push that down throughout the organization and change the culture into this always spotting, what the new technology is. Maybe there's a new automation tool. Maybe there's a new AI tool. Maybe there's a new technology we don't even know exists yet. And you can capitalize upon that because everybody's looking for, how do we find the 1%? Because sorry to use a baseball reference now, but singles win games, but we all want to hit a home run.
Of course.
And occasionally those singles become a home run. You just don't know which one's going to be it. And so that trial and error of finding that 1% and testing out new technology, see how it can help this portion. But oh my goodness, it can help X, Y, and Z. That turns a single into a home run. And so becoming familiar with the 1% change and looking at those little things is crucial to change the entire culture to think about, all right, how do we see our future looking? Now, we may not have a clear picture, but as long as we're taking tactical steps to learn and grow, that's how companies are going to excel past their competition, or just quite frankly, right now, just stay in business.
Yeah. Agreed. It's the adage that it brings to mind is how do you eat an elephant, right? One bite at a time. It's the same. They're all the same thing. I like the concept of 1% change, and for folks who can't figure out, like, I can't do 1% a day, and some industries that's just not feasible. 1% a week, in 1 year you've improved 50%. There's so many variations of this that you can make it viable. 1% a week is attainable, and you go, okay, well, I don't know how to get to 1%. Great. What's the next thing you could do? What's one step that you could do different? One little tweak that gets you closer. Just do that every week. Just do one little piece, and they all add up. And it's been proven for many, many, many years that it's a viable strategy. Neither you nor I are uncovering this, but we might be regurgitating it for the audience at best, right?
But the thing is that I find is everyone's so fearful. I was watching an automation presentation a week or two ago, think that's if 5% of companies have effectively implemented automation. That's not even AI. It's just automation.
Right.
And to me, it's the fear. And so I think, going back to what you were talking about and, you know, looking at the process, looking at the individual steps, your heartbeat slows down. It allows you to kind of think about more meaningfully, what that task is trying to accomplish. And just like ingredients in a kitchen, you start looking at what tools are available for me to do X, Y, or Z. And yes, as part of a system selection process, there's a lot of additional questions I would put on top of that just to make sure that you don't put yourself into a corner because if you have incompatible technologies or whatnot. But I think if we again go slow to go fast, you will find you will make quantum leaps much faster than you ever thought. I mean, it's the whole notion of Uber against the New York City cab companies.
Right. Now this,
Geolocating and texting were new.
right. This is a very key point. Another really important one, and I think this one is somehow has the chance to be overlooked a lot. I'll restate what you're doing, what you're talking about. Just make it clear. If you're looking to automate a process, it's an AI workflow that you want to put in place that takes over something that you're doing manually. Are you doing it manually the right way? Are you doing the right thing at all? So you have a task. The task needs to be done. You might have a manual way of doing it, and that's the way you've always done it, or the way that it was taught to you. There's all sorts of variables here. Does that mean that that's the way you should automate it? Because the reality is, maybe there's a completely different approach that uses AI or other tools or supporting tools for AI that does it a different way. And your concept here of, stop for a minute and actually think about it, and not necessarily just do the work breakdown structure approach, but also think about, okay, what am I trying to accomplish here? My goal is X. There are probably 8 ways to get to X. Is the current manual thing I'm doing the only possible viable answer? Or, look, there's 2 other tools over here that do things I didn't even know existed. And now my automation is these 2 tools and a summary at the end, and I'm good. And that's not what you were doing manually, right? And this concept of when you get in there, sometimes you have to throw in a grenade so you can make it better.
I'll push that back a little bit.
You don't like grenades, huh?
By the way, everybody that's watching this, I literally cut a workout, grab a shower, and I'm in front of the screen because I knew I had to be on this podcast with Jeff. That aside, that's why I'm a little
We appreciate you being
excited about it. I'm going to date myself a little bit. So going back 20 plus years, when I first got started at Deloitte, I was in business process reengineering and risk management. And one of the prophetic examples that was used was the partner had made a fictitious story about his grandmother. And, his wife always asked, why does your mom always, cut the meatloaf into 2 before putting it in the oven? And so finally, the partner asked, Mom, why do you cut up the meatloaf before you putting it in the oven? She's like, great question. She's like, well, when you were growing up, we only had a small oven. So we couldn't fit the whole meatloaf in the oven. So we had to cut it into 2. And I guess I just never changed the process. So I would, rather than use the word grenade, even though I really do like grenade, I would say cultivate a culture where questions are accepted, if not expected.
Yep, fair enough.
Because if we can't have a conversation, which I know is becoming more troublesome these days, but I think we need to almost reward individuals for asking just thoughtful questions. Because it's like when you're teaching, I learn sometimes more when I'm teaching than when I'm actually listening, because I need to be able to defend my point.
Yeah.
And it makes me think deeper about why I'm so certain about something. And when you ask a question of someone, instead of them taking it as a threat, you could change the culture and say, we're giving you a soapbox, we're giving you a table to stand on to be able to explain to the organization why this is such a powerful idea. And so it's almost like throwing an easy ball for somebody to hit out of the park. It also doesn't uncover sometimes things that we might have overlooked or biases that we have. And I think that's completely true right now with AI because so many people are reading surface level about it and not getting 6, 12, 18 inches deep into it. So we're making choices that we really don't have the background understanding about what we're telling somebody to do, about what to automate, how to do that, because they just fundamentally either don't understand the process because they're a technologist, or they don't understand the technology because they're the business process person. And this is where coming together, asking good questions about how do we do this, and going back to your approach about, let's do this work, process design, breaking it down, it allows us to have a nice contentious debate about, hey, you're a technologist, tell me how you can do that better. And not in a confrontational way, but show me how smart you are.
I completely agree. One of the things I wanted to ask was, what's something that you've recently used AI or automation to do for yourself? What's an example? You don't have to give us like a secret sauce. I don't want that, but high level.
So I spun up there's some new California legislation that just came out around workplace violence, and it's impacting every company that's 10 employees or larger.
Yep.
These are organizations that barely get their tax returns sometimes in on. Yet the fines can be $500,000 or more if you look at, the same law that was put into place for healthcare. And so being able to automate the execution of the assessment as well as the reporting, as well as creating the training video, allows me to penetrate all that with the knowledge and experience and tools that I have that I brought to the table ahead of time. But now I can do it in a fashion that's much faster. So AI can drop the cost. But B, if you think about an organization that may have just gotten hit with a lawsuit or some sort of trouble, I can quickly put a program into place that's fully compliant. Because going back to your point, you can't replace my knowledge and my experience and that of my partners. What I can do though is I can automate the accumulation of information, the reporting of it, even from an AI perspective, have it prompt what are different ways that industry could be affected, because the law is specific and says the risks have to be specific to your geography, your industry, your location, those types of things. Those are all questions that you can ask AI prompts to, and if you understand how to ask great prompts, it writes it in the same language that I would typically write it in. And I have a whole workbook that I've built out on prompts where it allows me to fast track that process. And so that to me is an intermediate step. The next step would be to how do we further automate this so there's even less fingers on the keyboard. So I'm serving up or digesting my own process of, all right, let's take each individual step and how do we do it 1% better or faster while still maintaining the quality. And that's the biggest thing. I'll come back to your audience. The biggest risk with automation and AI is quality, because we assume whatever's told to us, whether it's in ChatGPT, DeepSeek, or even if put together an automation, you assume that the output is correct. Well, that is going to be your pitfall, because you're probably not a technologist. You probably don't know what it means to do proper testing on it. And so if you assume it's correct, you know, you're probably going to find 8 times out of 10 that there's an error in there somewhere. And if your client catches that, you know, that's your reputation. And so you're going to allow AI or automation to ruin your reputation. I mean, that is where, I mean, there's, there's the fear of I'm going to get passed by because I don't do automation. But then what if you went so far so fast that you started making mistakes and nobody could rely upon your work anymore? That's the worst scenario, because now you tried to do the right thing, you spent the money, but now you don't have any clients.
Yeah, so let's talk for a second about why you might get inaccurate information from an LLM and how you can somehow protect against that to a certain extent. You can't make it perfect because the structure underlying how an AI or an LLM works is not something that you're going to ever get 100% facts out of at all times. It's just not the way it will operate. You'll get really close depending on how many dials you tweak. But at the end of the day, the system underlying the LLM really runs on mathematical probability. And probability is not a zero-sum game. There's variability in that mix, right? So one thing that you can do to get the best responses from the LLM, this is counterintuitive because Google has trained all of us for over 2 decades to do the wrong thing with respect to an LLM. So let me take a second and just explain. When you're doing a Google search, you're keyword searching. You're searching for the same words that you've typed into Google existing on other web pages together. That's what happens. If you type the whole sentence into Google, it ignores all the words that are 4 characters or less as not relevant and looks for the keywords. But that's not what an LLM needs. An LLM operates a different way. And so every single thing you give the LLM, it refers to as context. And the more words you give it, and the more descriptive you are, the more flowery your language, the better the result's going to be. And at a very high level, think of it like there's this super fun algorithm in the background that the LLM executes. And if you give it a Google search type phrase, why leaves color change? Which is a question that the LLM will answer. There's a potential when you have short questions like that you're not turning on enough of the functions in the underlying algorithm for it to really give you 100% the best answer. And this is what everybody refers to as hallucination, where the LLM says, well, I don't know if they meant this or that. I'm going to guess, or I'm going to insert my own piece of information. And that's all because the context wasn't accurate. If you change that question from why leaves change color to, can you explain the scientific reasons behind the fact that leaves change color usually in the end of the fall season? And is there a particular reason behind that? Does it have to do with sunlight? Does it have to do, if you just put in all that context, the answer you're going to get back is way more detailed, and it's going to talk about chlorophyll, and it's going to talk about a whole bunch of other stuff that might not have thrown out in the 4-word sentence. And so this is one of the strongest things that everybody that's using an LLM can do. If you're writing an LLM application, there's a system prompt along with a user prompt, and it's the system prompt where you can make this impact and cut down on the hallucinations. And if you're not writing an LLM application, you can ignore what I just said.
Well, I'll jump in there real quickly. One easy addition to your AI prompts that eliminates a lot of fabricated percentages or numbers is asking for reputable sources or citations, and it will scale down the number of, to your point, data sources that it goes after, because it's going to be looking for what are reputable sources, and then it provides the citation so you can actually double check that information. Because far too often I find individuals that'll tell me that 87% of statistics are wrong.
Yeah, no kidding. Including that one, because it's a statistic. And you got to be careful with citations, though, because if the LLM is in the right mood, it'll just invent a citation for you. And that's what you're saying by checking it. I'm just trying to clarify for the audience. You've got to go check those citations. Just because you see a citation doesn't mean it's real.
No. It doesn't replace the work. And that's ultimately any executive that's listening to this or watching this right now. AI and automation don't replace the hard thinking. And again, it's another pitfall that I see organizations getting into, is that they see that these technologies can reduce the work. Well, when you talk about hard thinking, it can inform you on strategies, but ultimately, when it comes down to a subjective decision or a relationship or those types of ideas, you do need to have an injection of human thought. And going back to your point about checking the references, those types of things, it is kind of a manual task but it goes back to some level of deep thinking. I mean, you need to make sure that it was the Harvard Business Review and not some random website that nobody knows about. Nobody knows of.
I've seen some posts online from folks who are trying to be helpful and showing things like, hey, if you're working on an AI workflow or an automation, and you want to verify that the information you're getting from the LLM is useful, here's a cool way to do that. And almost every one of those comes down to ask another LLM. And I think that they're trying to be helpful. I don't think they're trying to poison the system, but part of what they're saying there's some validity to, and that's that if you ask GPT, if you ask OpenAI, ChatGPT, whatever, a question, and you get back a decent sized answer, maybe you got 5 or 6 bullets, and you take those bullets and you go over to and you go to Anthropic and you ask Claude, a completely different model, to review and evaluate those answers, it very much will review and evaluate those answers. But it doesn't mean either one of them are giving you facts. And your comment, I think, is very valid. You still have to do the work to ensure accuracy or factuality or what have you. Now, if your use of AI is much more on the funsies side of the world, or you're just trying to create, entertaining content to post online just to catch people's attention, okay, sure, you can be more or frivolous. That's fine. But if you're trying to do work, you kind of have to do the work to an extent, right?
Yeah, I was consulting with a blockchain company, basically for about 4 months, first part of this year. And the reason why we got to agree to disagree was they had built a financial model, a very simple one, and it was estimating the size of the Bitcoin loan market.
Okay.
And when I started, I mean, and we're kind of getting out there. So if you're not crypto friendly, I'll try to make this quick. The concept's still the same. They built a financial model, which is your projections, your growth, your revenue, your profits, whatever.
Yeah.
But when they did their search, they came back with just the Bitcoin loan market. And so that just means the blockchain product is all around collateralization of crypto assets. So whether it's cryptocurrencies or otherwise, because that market is going to explode. BCG and McKinsey both say it's 10% of world assets will be on chain by 2030. The reason why that last stat means something is that the numbers that they had used, they had simply done either an AI search or a Google search and found a headline about what the projected size of the market is.
Right.
But when I pressed on it over the course of 2.5 weeks, they finally fessed up that they never even bought the underlying report to show how how the author got to that number.
Right.
So how are you going to go to investors and be able to explain, and because they're in the investment round, how are you going to substantiate that you're right? Because you don't even know the fundamentals, how that number came to be. And this is the same thing as AI, is if you just regurgitate what's coming out to you, at some point in time, somebody's going to ask a question that'll make you look the fool. I hate to be the doomsdayer on this one, but the worst thing you can do, and I've been in enough board meetings and executive meetings, is that when somebody presses on the right question and you can't answer it, you are a house of cards because you might have had a brilliant idea, but because you couldn't substantiate it, not because you were wrong, but because it's obvious that you didn't do the work. Your idea may last, but you're probably not going to.
Yeah, there's a lot of angst in the system about the hype mobile around crypto and whether it'll ever reach a little bit more sort of mainstream acceptance where there's, not as much trickery. There's a lot of folks that are riding on that hype and doing some stuff that it's not exactly above par, right?
For the sake of your show, I won't go deep into it, but philosophically, I think it's here to stay. But we can have another whole show
Yeah,
on
no,
that
I
one.
hear you. And I actually am not anti-crypto, but I am I am suggesting that there's a lot of folks who are skeptical at the moment because there's so many instances of folks trying to take advantage of the system.
The same thing was when the internet was formed. It was not done so in a business mind. It was a bunch of nefarious activities that were happening on the internet that funded the internet. And it's the same thing with crypto. But having a decentralized ledger is very useful. That's irrefutable, meaning for those that are listening, irrefutable means can't alter it. And so it's not like you can go into the back end of your SAP or your financial software and modify the numbers. With crypto, you can't. There's definitive nature of that ledger. But again, Phil, that's a deep hole to cover in a couple minutes.
Yeah. No, we don't want to get that far. No, I think we've actually had a really good conversation. Let's see if we can tie it off here. From your point of view, where are you looking next from an AI perspective? Like, what's the next thing you want to use AI to do, or what's the next piece you want to automate or whatever?
For myself, as well as my clients, as well as I believe for the world, we are still at the early stages of the maturity curve. My recommendation to your listeners, and happy to chat with you further on another cast or anybody if they want to reach out, is modularity. How you will be successful with AI or automation is modularity. Think about it like Legos, because with Legos, you can interchange parts. So you do not disrupt the beast by ripping out the entire technology system to replace it with AI. It's suicide for your business and your financials. I would employ somebody to take a step back and look at a process or your organization or whatever and modulize each task. And then there's different tools that you can use to rank both what the probability and the efficiencies that you'll gain, but also what the risks are, because any change involves risk. And that is so critical because we are all cowboys and cowgirls right now, thinking that we're going to take over the landstead. And we forget that there may be some, people that have been living there ahead of time that don't want you there, for better words. I mean, you're going to come into conflict. And in those situations, by taking a very pragmatic, module, Lego approach, again, going back to the 1%, if we can continuously refine, you're going to see over the course of 6, 12, 18, 24 months, your organization go from X profit margin to Y. And these are all measurable statistics that you can use to see where your money's going and what the ultimate impact is for both yourself, your wealth, and your organization.
Okay. No, I think that's exceptionally good advice. I don't have a tremendous amount I'd add to that. I do like that small moves kind of thing. And I do think that strategy is a recipe for success. I've used it myself. All right, cool. Jack, it was, we had some stumbles trying to get ourselves here. We both shot ourselves in the foot each time, but we got here, and I think we had a good conversation. I enjoyed it.